Welcome everyone this morning. My name is Nayaswami Devarshi, for those of you who have not met me. It's wonderful to be sharing this satsang today on this beautiful topic of the healing light of the divine. This divine healing light is an inner light. It's not an outer light. It's not the light of the world. It's really cosmic divine light, and that light, in fact, is God. This is not the lights necessarily that we see, lights plural in meditation. I'm no longer surprised by how often people, especially people who are learning meditation, come up to me with great excitement and say, oh, I saw these lights and this red light here and this blue light over here and it moved this way, and what does it all mean? And they're very excited about it. And I think we can all say that we've had a similar experience. And they're looking for some cosmic divine symbolic truth about this chakras or the koshas or this or that and the meaning. And I tell them, these are either subconscious lights and images, or you just are not calm enough and centered enough to see the real divine light. Because in fact, when you see the divine light, it's not just the spiritual eye that we see perfectly, it's healing light, it's calming light, it's purifying light, and one is not excited about it. One is actually inspired and deeply calmed, as Swamiji points out in this reading. There's a very dumb joke about a man who's walking one night on a dark street, and he sees a street lamp, and under the lamp there's another man crawling on his hands and knees looking for something. And he comes in, offers to help, and how can I help you? And the man says, oh, I've lost my car key. Will you help me find it? And so he helps him, and he crawls around looking, and finally there's just no car key there. And he finally asks the man, where did you lose your key? And the man said, well, I lost it over there where it's really dark, but I can't see over there, so I'm looking over here. And it sounds dumb, and we think this person must be really stupid, but in fact, how often have we done that? In fact, we probably have done that for, maybe the last 1,000,000 incarnations or so, because we're looking for the key outside of ourselves, where there's light, rather than in the darkness behind closed eyes in meditation. And so we are used to finding fulfillment and finding the truth out there, because we think we're going to find it out there in fame and wealth, in relationships, in perfect health, and all these things. And none of these things are bad in and of themselves. But in fact, we're looking in the wrong place. And the way to look is inside, in meditation first, but eventually also to see that light in others, to see that light all around us. There's a beautiful song, one of my favorites, which was written many years ago by the Beatles. And it's called The Inner Light. And the words are, without going out of my door, I can see all things on earth. Without looking out of my window, I can know the ways of heaven. The farther one travels, the less one knows, the less one really knows. I sing this song to myself when I travel, which I do a lot of traveling. And it's not really about traveling, but it's about going outside of ourselves and again trying to find truth, trying to find enlightenment, which really is trying to find the light somewhere besides, deep inside our own self. And so the whole of the spiritual path is boiled down to God as light. And this essentially is the way out, the redeeming light. This light, in a way, is not just something that we achieve or find, because it is the light of God. It also is the light of divine grace. And it comes through regular daily practice. There's a saying of Yoganandaji's that he said many times, and he said that God is just behind your thoughts. And this is a very important saying of his. God is just behind your thoughts. Because how often have I heard people, when they learn to meditate, and sometimes after many years of meditation, I think we all experience this, you can be meditating for 20, 30 years and you sit down and all of a sudden there are all these thoughts and all this restlessness. Has anyone else ever experienced that in meditation? And the whole process of meditation is trying to get behind those thoughts. And in a way, you could say those thoughts are like the clouds hiding the sun. And what Yoganandaji said, it's important to realize, he said God is just behind those thoughts. For many years I would be traveling when I lived at Ananda Village in California. And I would be all over the world, coming from India, coming from South America. And after 30, 35 hours traveling on the road, I would finally get in my car at the airport in Sacramento and drive to Ananda Village. And just 1 kilometer from Ananda Village, there's this very old farmhouse. It's so old and decrepit that it's been falling apart for many years, and in fact it finally disintegrated just before I left a year ago. And it's so old that there's a hole in the roof, and there's a tree inside the farmhouse growing through the roof, way, way high up in the air. And whenever I came across this old, funky farm and barn, I knew I was very close to home. And I knew that Ananda was just behind that barn. And to go all the way, millions of lifetimes of seeking out there, and finally coming to the path of meditation, sitting down and facing your restless thoughts, where God is just behind those thoughts, and then giving up at that moment is really, really dumb. It would be like me traveling for 30 hours, seeing that really funky barn and thinking, this isn't very nice looking, I'm going to turn around and go back, just 1 kilometer away from home. And this really is what we have to realize when we face our restless thoughts in meditation, that we are very, very, very close. It's probably taking us, again, 1 million lifetimes of seeking out there before we finally close our eyes, sit in meditation, look up, and the clouds are there covering the sun. And we are oh so close. After so many lifetimes of seeking, God is just behind those clouds. And those clouds, those thoughts, are dissolved in 2 ways. One is that the sun itself, when it's a very foggy morning, if we're patient, the sun eventually burns up that fog. And if we open ourselves to the light, are receptive to divine grace, eventually God as light will burn up the clouds of our restless thoughts. But also through meditation, through our own efforts, through calmness, through practice, through techniques such as Hong Sao technique, we can calm our mind. We can start to dissipate those thoughts, those clouds. And don't get discouraged when you have restless thoughts. This, I think, is one reason why Yoganandaji, someone came to him who was a disciple, who was practicing these things, who was having a lot of tests. And he said to the master, I must have really bad karma. And I think we all think this sometimes of ourselves. I know I have. We just think, oh, I try so hard, and this karma comes and knocks me down, and this person was going through this. And Yoganandaji said, no. He said, just to want to know God, you have to have very, very, very good karma. And so we are very close. God is very close when we even want to learn to meditate and start to, again, see those restless thoughts. Yoganandaji, in one of his writings, in fact, said that God is light. He had this experience as a child of just, I think, 2 years old or so, where he saw these devas in a vision, and then this overwhelming, beautiful light. And this voice said, I am Ishvara, I am divine light. And there are also Christian teachings that say the same thing, God is light. There was one of my favorite saints in Christianity. It's one of the very few saints Swami Kriyanandaji ever talked about. He had the very imposing and ponderous name of Simeon the New Theologian. And he wasn't new because he was alive 1,000 years ago. And I sort of resisted learning more about him, but then I understood that in those days, a theologian was someone who knew God, not someone who studied the scriptures. And like many of the Christian saints, Christians seem to have this bad habit of persecuting their saints rather than honoring and revering them. And because he was so magnetic, because he had the experience of God as light, in fact, he repeated over and over again, I'll read what he says about God as divine light. He says, it shines on us without evening, without change, without alteration, without form. It speaks, works, lives, gives life, and changes into light those whom it illuminates. We bear witness that God is light, and those to whom it has been granted to see him have all beheld him as light. Those who have received grace have received the light of God and have received God. And I'll just add a little story of his life because it's just interesting more than anything else. Eventually, because he preached that one must experience God as light and that God is light, the church thought this was heresy, and they threw him out of the church. They put him on a boat. They took him to a remote shore and dumped him off without food or water in the middle of the winter where it was freezing cold. So this is how the Christian church treats its saints. But because God was with him, light was with him, he was able to gather his life together, and people were still drawn to him. And eventually the church was forced to take him back because he was so popular with people. And this is the way of light. It has also a great divine power. Yoganandaji said about this light one time, he said it's like millions of suns in the intensity when you have the experience of this light. But he also said it's gentle and soothing because it's purifying and cleansing. And so in meditation, make it a conscious practice to try to pray to God as light. And it can be something you do for the next few weeks as an experiment. Try to visualize God as coming as rays of divine blessing, divine light, coming and healing you. Yoganandaji mentions very often, and I think he mentioned it, Swamiji, in this reading, about this man who was healed by the divine light. And the whole story is that this man had diabetes, and he was given 3 months to live. And so he thought, okay, I'll spend these last 3 months in meditation and prayer, tuning into God. And so that's what he did. And then the way Yoganandaji puts it, he says, after 3 years, suddenly a great light filled his being. He was caught up in ecstasy. On returning from that divine state, he found that his body had been healed. Lord, he prayed, I did not ask for a healing. All I asked was that you come to me. And the voice of the Lord answered, where my light is, there no darkness can dwell. The saint then wrote with his finger on the sand, and on this day the Lord came into my broken temple and made it whole. And so this light can heal, it can transform, and this light is the light of divine grace in the end. And so also when we meditate on God, be receptive to this light, wanting to come to us, wanting to heal us, wanting to transform us. There's a tendency, I think, when we get caught up in the darkness of error and mistake, and we stumble spiritually, there's a tendency to turn away from the light, almost in embarrassment and shame, and we don't want to go to God or to the Guru. But in fact, that is the very time to go to God or to the Guru. As Swamiji wrote in a song, you can't drive out the darkness with a stick. And that stick sometimes is in the form of religions that preach hate and condemnation, or in our own selves, when we use the stick of shame and embarrassment to beat ourselves up. And that is the very time to go to the light, to go to the Guru, to go to God, and say simply, I am your child. Heal me, free me from my mistakes, from my error. Because really, in a way, spiritual ignorance and that kind of mistake that we made is really no different from a physical ailment. It's something that's foreign to us. I think we tend to identify more with spiritual mistakes because it's of the mind and it's of the will, and we think this is me, I am my mistakes, and we tend to identify ourselves by our mistakes sometimes, especially when we're in that rut of failing in a way. And again, don't identify with the light. turn to the light in big ways, in little ways. And we're not just talking again about light per se. Anytime we turn towards divine grace, towards divine truth, in an activity, even not just in meditation, anytime even that we look at a person and see the light of God in them, or just chant God's name as we go throughout the day, we are attuning ourselves to divine light and to divine grace. So make this a regular practice, especially in meditation. Yoganandaji, I'll end with something that he said, and this is almost in a way a guided meditation. He said, "Just behind the darkness of closed eyes shines the light of God. When you behold that light in meditation, hold on to it with devotional zeal. Feel yourself inside it. That is where God dwells. If, on the other hand, you behold no light in meditation, then concentrate at the point between the eyebrows and gaze deeply into the darkness that you see with closed eyes. Try, by your devotion, to penetrate that thick veil. In time, you will surely behold the inner light, for it is ever there, shining in your forehead. Just as all human beings have eyes, so does everyone have this spiritual eye within his forehead. It awaits only his discovery in deep concentration within. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti." We'll have in conclusion